The first sign that something was wrong was not the silence, it was the crying that never came. Because in Oduk village, babies were always crying, day and night. From clay huts and palm houses, from compounds big and small. But one season passed and no woman swelled with child. Another season passed and no midwife was called. Another season passed and the village grew unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes even strong men uneasy, and the elders told themselves it was coincidence until the third year arrived and not a single woman had given birth. Not one cry, not one naming ceremony, not one newborn wrapped in cloth, and that was when fear stopped being whispered and started sitting openly in people's hearts, because a village without children is a village already halfway dead, and yet no sickness could be named, no curse openly spoken, no shrine publicly accused. The women were healthy, their bodies strong, their cycles normal, but their wombs were empty, as if life itself had turned its back on Oduk. And it was during this time, when desperation had made the men harsh and the women quietly broken, that a stranger walked into the village just before sunset. His name was Adesina, tall, calm, carrying nothing but a small leather bag and eyes that looked like they had seen endings before beginnings. He did not ask for food first. He did not ask for shelter first. He stood in the center of the village square and said something that made people uncomfortable before they even understood why. He said, "Your village is not barren. It is being punished for remembering the wrong thing and forgetting the right one." Some laughed nervously. Others felt anger rise, because who was this outsider to speak in riddles when even the elders were confused? Mama Ireti, the oldest woman alive, stared at him longer than anyone else, her hands trembling on her walking stick because something in his voice sounded too familiar. The chief, Baba Kalawul, demanded to know what he meant, and Adesina replied calmly that life had been blocked, not stolen, sealed, not destroyed, and seals can only be broken where they were placed. That was when the women began to cry openly, because for years they had prayed, sacrificed, fasted, blamed themselves, blamed each other, blamed their bodies, never once imagining that the wombs were not the problem. The village was. Adesina asked a simple question that no one wanted to answer. He asked who was the last woman to die without being mourned properly. The square went still, too still. Eyes shifted, throats tightened, because everyone remembered, even if no one spoke her name. Her name was Morayo, a quiet woman who lived alone near the old silk cotton tree, a woman who never married, never explained herself, never begged for acceptance, the same Morayo the women had once avoided and the men had once mocked, the same Morayo who had been accused of pride simply because she chose solitude, the same Morayo who fell sick one night and died alone while the village slept comfortably. Her body discovered days later, untouched, unmourned, quickly buried without rites, because people said she brought bad luck. Mama Ireti's knees buckled at the memory, and Adesina nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. He said Morayo was not powerful in life, but powerful in death, because injustice, when ignored, does not disappear. It waits. He explained that the ancestors do not punish immediately. When a wrong is done, they watch to see if remorse will grow on its own. But in Oduk, no remorse came, only relief. Relief that a woman who refused to feed had vanished quietly, and so the ancestors sealed the future where the sin was committed. They sealed the wombs, not out of hatred for women, but to force the village to look directly at what it had buried. Panic spread as men began to shout, some denying everything, some accusing Morayo, even in death. And that was when Adesina's voice sharpened. He said the seal would not lift through sacrifice, prayer, or medicine, only through truth spoken aloud and justice done willingly. He demanded that the village give Morayo what they had denied her, not tears alone, but acknowledgement. He said the women of Oduk would not give birth again until the village admitted that a woman's worth is not measured by marriage, obedience, or usefulness to others. The men scoffed, calling it foolishness. But the women listened, because deep down they knew the pain of being reduced to wombs, to expectations, to silence. That night the village argued until voices broke, husbands and wives fighting, elders divided, until something happened that could not be ignored. Mama Ireti stood up, raised her shaking voice, and confessed that she herself had turned Moriah away years earlier. When the woman came seeking help, she admitted she had chosen peace over justice, comfort over courage, and that confession cracked something open. One by one, others spoke. A man named Sola admitted he had spread lies about Morayo after she rejected him. A woman named Bisi admitted she had mocked her to feel better about her own miserable marriage. Each confession felt like tearing skin, but with every truth spoken the air grew lighter. Adesina remained silent, watching until dawn, when he told them the final step was not words, but action. He instructed them to exhume Moreo's body, cleanse it properly, give her full rights, sing her name, and publicly declare that her choice to live alone was not a crime. Fear gripped the village, because disturbing the dead is never taken lightly. But desperation outweighed fear. They did as instructed. Under the silk cotton tree they found her remains, and as the women washed the bones, something extraordinary happened. One of the younger women, Ayo, cried out in pain and then in shock, because blood ran down her legs, not illness, not injury, but life returning. The stranger watched quietly as realization spread like wildfire. The seal was breaking. The ancestors were listening, and just as suddenly as he had arrived, Adesina prepared to leave. Baba Kelauli tried to stop him, demanding to know who he really was. Adesina looked back once and said, "Some call me a messenger, some call me memory, but I am only sent where forgetting has gone too far." And he walked into the forest, never to be seen again. But Ojuk was never the same, because birth returned, yes, but so did something else, awareness, and every time a child cried in the night, the elders remembered that life does not disappear without reason, and injustice never stays buried forever. It waits, patiently, for the moment it will be heard, and the story did not end there, because Oduk still had more to learn, and the ancestors were still watching, always watching. Because even after life returned to Oduk, peace did not come immediately. Pregnancy spread through the village like a quiet miracle, belly swelling almost at once. But joy arrived mixed with shame, because every kick inside those wombs reminded the people of how close they had come to extinction, through cruelty disguised as tradition. And as months passed, the children were born one by one, crying loudly as if announcing not just their arrival, but a warning. Midwives whispered that they had never seen birth so easy, so smooth, as though the land itself was eager to correct its mistake. Yet the elders noticed something else too, something unsettling. Every child born that year had eyes that seemed too alert, too knowing, and Mama Ireti would often mutter that the ancestors had returned not only life, but memory, making sure the next generation would not forget what the last one tried to. Berry Morayal's name was spoken openly now. Her grave tended daily. Children taught her story before they were taught their lineage, and no woman in Oduk was ever again forced to explain why she chose the life she chose, because the village had learned the hard way that when you silence a woman unjustly, you do not just harm her, you poison the future itself, and sometimes the punishment does not come as fire or death, but as emptiness, quiet, and the slow terror of realizing tomorrow has been taken away. Oduk survived, but it survived changed, humbled, more careful with its judgments, more fearful of its certainty, and elders would often say that the most dangerous curses are not spoken, they are earned, and they do not always arrive screaming. Sometimes they arrive as nothing at all, as silence, as empty cradles, as unanswered prayers, and that is why this story is still told today, not to frighten, but to remind that every village, every society, every family is always being tested, sometimes by strangers, sometimes by the quiet people they choose to ignore, and the ancestors are always watching how those tests are answered. So if this story made you pause, if it made you think, if it made you uncomfortable in the right way, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more powerful African stories that carry truth inside them, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what lesson you took from Ojuk, because stories live longer when they are shared, and this is one that should never be forgotten.